What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 12, 13, maybe 13, 12. I don't know. Whatever it is, we're going to find out. Of Contemplations with Austin West. I think I'm on day 13. Yeah. It is Saturday, June 27th, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to do it. I got places to be. Starting to feel myself getting into a groove of this thing and just easily integrating it into my life to where I can still live and do things and also commit to this 40-day devotional. So thank y'all so much for being here. And today's contemplation is by Mr. Jeff Howell, a.k.a. Sika. What's up, bro? Thank you for submitting this. How words create our world. Ho ho! Yeah, I love this one. How our words create our world. First thing that comes to mind is a quote by Peter Crone, the mind architect, one of my biggest teachers in this life. He says, words don't describe our reality. They create it. And I couldn't think of anything that's more true. So let's think of what words are. And this is Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory. That's the it's so hard for me to show you guys my tattoos. That's the stoned ape theory. Terence McKenna right there, theorized that consciousness was conjured through our ape ancestors eating psychedelic mushrooms over a multi-100,000-year period, which started to trigger patterns, neuroplasticity, neuropathways, neurogenesis, increase of brain-derived neurotropic factor, all these things in the brain that started to create the experience of wanting to talk about what these altered states of consciousness are. And so apes developed language, which helped develop consciousness through the use of these psychedelic mushrooms. And so his whole theory, it's wild, it's deep, it's profound in his book, Food of the Gods. And it really comes down to his whole theory is revised around we wanted to talk about these experiences, because when we experience reality, words are the very thing that help us describe the reality that we're creating through the very words that we use. And so it's this I have this thing called the prayer of remembering. Shout out Chris Hager for this practice that I've been with for years now. And this prayer, I got the ping I was probably going to do it today, and I decided not to. So maybe next episode I'll just read my prayer of remembering and what it means and give people a path to creating their own. And the importance of the prayer of remembering for me is it is a guidebook of my being and becoming. And every time I read this prayer, I'm only ever able to write it from the perspective of who I am, who I believe myself to be, and the perspective of who I believe myself capable of being. So it's a being and becoming practice, all tied into the present moment. And that's why every time I read this prayer of remembering, I get reflected to the parts of me where like, yes, I am showing up in the world this way. And I get reflected to the parts of me of like, wow, I've fallen off the course. Like, this is a beautiful reminder of the pointed arrow, who I want to become and where I want to go in this life. All of that is word. And those words are just a reflection of what I'm moving through in a mental and emotional state of all times. And a lot of my coaching work, what I do with a lot of people, and even my Q&As and the cohort, all the work I do with a lot of people, I'm paying such close attention to the words they use. Because a lot of times somebody will use a word and I get this, we're in a place in humanity where a lot of people's gifts are coming online. And don't get me wrong, I believe in channelers, I believe in mediums, I believe in mystics, I believe in prophets, and there are a lot of charlatans out there. A lot. There are a lot of them who just so happen to only ever paint negative images, and I don't fuck with the frequency of fear. Y'all know that. I've been talking about how discerning I've been about what I let into my field, and if it's of the frequency of fear, nope, I don't play that game. I believe that we are creating everything from the frequency we live in. So if your message is rooted in fear, separation, judgment, shame, guilt, needing, shoulding, if it's rooted in any of that, you have nothing for me. Ha! If we all lived that way, we could help those energies slowly dissipate and allow the goodness to rise. Anyway, A lot of charlatans. And I believe there's a lot of very gifted people out there. And lately, something that's been difficult for me to fully acknowledge, and here I am talking about it out loud, so maybe this is part of me acknowledging it. The powers that be that give me these gifts, let this be my staff, my stake, my Gandalf on the bridge moment where I stake the claim that I'm owning my gifts, I'm owning my power, I'm owning the divine that wants to move through me in beautiful ways that have been demonized by the world to take us out of our power and our gifts and our intuitive nature and knowing. With that being said, I think one of my gifts is when people say certain words, I get this like explosion of imagery in my head. It's like this, imagine if you're not watching, it's like I'm making a really tiny hole in between my finger and my thumb, and the word just seeps through that, and it just explodes into this cone spiral of imagery, and it shows me what that word means to that person. Like it paints their belief systems, their stories, their narratives, their inner dialect, their parental dynamics, their relational dynamics. When people say certain things, I can pick up on everything that is behind that. And then we just pause in those moments. Hey, let's be with that. What does that mean to you? Why did you use that word specifically? Because our words are that important. Your words are creating everything. And this is the being and becoming thing. The thing that's so fascinating about language is I'm only ever using language to confirm my belief. And in that confirmation of belief, I'm also creating more of that in this life. So again, it's being and becoming. I'm only ever using language from the perspective of who I believe myself, the world, reality, relationships, love, hate, all of what I believe that to be. And by continuing to perpetuate those words, use that verbiage, tell the story in that same way, I'm telling God, universe, source, whatever's moving through me, that I also decide and I choose that this is the way I want my life to be moving forward. Like, feel into that. We're going to take 10 seconds. You know I love my pauses. Feel into the power and potency of every single word you use, and that is informing you about yourself, the stories you tell, the beliefs you hold, the traumas and wounds that you continue to perpetuate. And by using that language, you're telling God that I decide and choose to continue to live this life that way. That's a deep one to contemplate, because there's a lot of ownership and responsibility that comes with that. A lot of ownership and responsibility. And so the practice inside of this is can you take complete radical ownership and responsibility for the undeniable, undisputable, unequivocal fact that you are creating your own life to be a victim or to be a creator, based on the words that you choose to think, write, and speak. Like, the hard thing about talking about victim consciousness is when somebody is in it, they can only ever receive from that state of consciousness. And so a lot of times talking about victim consciousness can feel like an attack to somebody in that state of being. And what victim consciousness really is, and this is one of the deep-seated evils, that word came out, so I'm going to stick with it. One of the deep-seated evils of religion is this built-in narrative that we need a savior. Because if I go in, if I feel my own darkness, my own shadow, my own parts coming online, the victim mentality that says I need something or someone outside of myself to save me tells me that when that part of me comes up, I can't be with it. I can't look at it. This isn't for me to heal. This isn't for me to hold. This isn't for me to feel. Think about how deep that goes, y'all. If we believe we need a savior, we are in victim consciousness. There's victim consciousness that is deeply seated into all religion. And that victim consciousness is seeded out based on the language we use and continue to perpetuate. And this is the parts I can notice in people when I'm doing Q&As and coaching and holding space. It's like, yo, you just use that word. You can defend it and fight it, but that word means this, and you spoke it with intention, which means that you believe and think that. It's that simple. So what words are you using? And if you've been in I did this, I think, 2 podcasts ago. I think it was 2 podcasts ago. I used the word, I can't remember, but I pulled it back in real time and was like, fuck that spell. It's like I'm so specific about my word. I try to be so specific, even right there. I am so specific, and I attempt to be so specific with the language I use because the language I use is informing me of everything. Let's take this to the next level. When I'm listening to somebody speak, and there's ands, and there's ums, and there's pauses, and there's deflections, it tells me that they don't have confidence or belief in what they're saying. And this is why I made this post the other day. Until you start telling yourself the truth, the world will be able to gaslight you. Because when you start telling yourself the truth, you see the stories and narratives that you run through your language. And because you start to realize what your language is doing for your own life, when you see somebody else in that language, you're like, oh, you're a liar. Oh, wow. This is why everything a politician says, I can pick up on the frequency of their truth or their lie. Because words are that powerful. They're witchcraft. They're spells. Let's talk about that for a second. Spelling. Is there an accident that... No. Everything is symbolism, y'all. Everything is symbolism, y'all. The fact that spelling has spell in it, we are casting spells with our words. This is why journaling is so powerful. This is why manifestation through spoken word, through thought, through written word is so powerful. This is why when we're moving through a process with our parents or somebody who wounded us and we write a letter to them expressing everything that we never got a chance to say and then we burn that letter, that is literally burning and releasing energetic ties between you and that person based on whatever happened. Our words are that powerful. They are not only creating reality, as Peter Crone says, but in my opinion, they are also reflecting the version of ourselves, the belief systems and the stories we hold that are then perpetuating the reality that's being created. I think that's a better way for me to actually articulate that. Start quoting myself instead of another person. I do love Peter, though. Words. They're that powerful. And this is when you really start paying attention to language and etymology and root words of languages. Think about this one. I don't know why religion's coming into this. And again, I'm not demonizing the gospel. I'm not demonizing, like, Jesus is my homie, y'all. He's my homie because he's not above or below me. He's a brother. I am no different than that man. He was a high-frequency being that was able to create miracles based on the frequency that his heart embodied in this world. He is not to be worshipped. He never wanted to be worshipped. Where I struggle inside of all of these is where I can see the manipulation of language to be used in the guise to control people and keep them in victim consciousness. My mission in this life is to bring people back home to the self, to realize that God is found within, and you are sovereign from the need of anything or anyone outside of you to ever fulfill something that you believe you need of them. Self-sovereignty, power. And when we learn to tap into sovereignty, we tap into our authenticity, which is our greatest gift to this life. But if you are in victim consciousness, you cannot be authentic. Because you're giving your power away to someone else, which is not rooted in authenticity. And so when I look at something like, and I'm also here for these reflections. I would love to chat about this more. And my whole thing is, it's like, yeah, I'll do a whole podcast on my journey with religion and stuff. But I've studied deeply. I've read the Quran. I've read the Bible. I've studied Judaism. I took 3 years of it in college. I've gone down all the esoteric and mystical rabbit holes, the psychedelic rabbit hole, the spiritual rabbit holes. Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. It goes into every major spiritual, mystical tradition over the last thousands of years. I've read that book multiple times. It's like 900 pages or something. I've read Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, where John Marco Allegro, who's a pastor for 22 years, studied the Dead Sea Scrolls for 17 years, and after being almost 40 years in the Catholic religion, came to the conclusion that the entire Christian religion is a mushroom fertility cult. the Eleusinian mysteries. It goes on and on and on. I've read probably 100 books on this topic. And so this is where my perspective comes from. I'm not living in a dogmatic universe where it's not that, so it's this. It's like, let's take all of it encompassing. And so I bring this up to point at like one root word, the reason why getting to the etymology, where language comes from, because it's seeded with this power and life force. Elohim. It's a plural word for gods, for multiples. That is the original word used for God in the Hebrew Bible. Elohim, multiples. The entire context of that thing changes in that language now. But when we bastardize language and we make it to fit our own narrative and program, then everything from there melts. The same thing is happening in our lives. If we're not paying that close attention to the proper use of the words that we use, then we cast a spell that creates an incongruency of the truth that we're living in, and we wonder why we start to suffer. Our words are telling us everything we need to know. Everything. Everything. Shout out to my brothers Zen, Alexander, Tyler, that we're always, when we're in dialectic with each other, we're constantly like, oh, did you mean, I had a call with Tyler 2 days ago. And he said something. I'm like, I just gave him like a little side look. And he's like, you're right. I didn't even have to say anything. He understood in that moment that the word he used was actually confirming a limiting or victim belief within himself. And so he pulled it back, and we gave ourselves the opportunity to change direction in the conversation. Think about this as well. So I've been talking all about the words from our perspective, how important they are. Now think about the words that we take in. Music. If I'm listening to a song that's like fuck bitches, fuck hoes, all of these things where it's objectifying and putting a hierarchy in place about women, do you not think that is seeding the consciousness of men to look at women that way? Come on, y'all. The music we listen to is casting spells that is teaching us how to relate to our reality. This is why certain rap music is so bad. This is why certain country music, when all it is depressing, it's teaching you that love is nothing but depressing. So when you go to be in another loving relationship and you have this painted framework that has been subliminally seeded into you based on what you choose to listen to in this life, you have this deep-seated belief and root that this isn't going to work because of blah, 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 blah. And you don't even realize it's because you've been casting spells based on what you listen to. Everything we take in is so important. This is why cleaning up your social media. How much fear porn are you watching and listening to? These words are casting spells to create your own reality, and then you use those same words to inform yourself of the reality you're creating. And this is why I'm so big on my verbiage. That feels complete. It was a good one. And I felt like I could have gone on a lot of tangents inside there. So let me know if any of those are episode contemplation tangents you'd like me to go into. I do feel myself being called to read my prayer of remembering publicly for the first time, putting it on the interwebs and letting y'all get a view into my life, into the prayer I hold for myself, and just the power and potency of language. And maybe that'll give you the idea to write one on your own. Appreciate you all, as always. I appreciate the likes, the comments, the shares, the subscriptions. I'm not going to stop. This has been so much fun for me, and your support is why I keep it going. Appreciate you all. Love you all so much. Enjoy your Saturday. Have a blessed week. Peace, y'all.